Hi, this is Congressman Thomas Massie. I represent Kentucky's 4th District. I'm here with Dr. John Lott of Crime Prevention Research Center. And our special guest, all the way from Colorado, is Weld County Sheriff Steve Reams. And we're here to talk about red flag laws. You made the news here recently, Sheriff Reams. Could you tell us what people mean when they say red flag laws or ERPOs?
Sure. Well, ERPO means Extreme Risk Protection Order, but it's basically a civil process to take someone's firearms away when they're considered to be a significant risk to themselves or others. It sounds good on face value. Nobody wants a mentally ill person to have a firearm. The devil is in the details, though, on these extreme risk protection orders, because they really don't address the person. They just address removing a firearm.
So what brings you to Washington, D.C. today?
Well, I came out to Washington, D.C. to do a little bit of lobbying and some talking like this with the National Association of Gun Rights as well. And so we're just trying to make people aware that the model that's been adopted in Colorado is a very bad model. We don't want that to become a model nationally.
And Dr. Lott, can you tell us some of the places that you've taught before and maybe one or two of your books that you've recently published?
Well, I've been an academic most of my life. I've had positions at the Wharton Business School, University of Chicago, Stanford, Yale, Rice. So I've been around a little bit. But I was just going to say on the red flag laws, it's kind of like the Tom Cruise movie Minority Report, where they're trying to predict whether somebody's going to go and commit a crime or be a danger to themselves in the future. The only difference is Tom Cruise had psychics helping him out, and they don't have psychics here. So, I was briefly on this Uniform Law Commission report that they were doing, where they were thinking about putting together a model red flag law. And the thing is, so many of these laws are very vague on what they look for. And so you go and ask the people who've been running these laws in different states, what do you look for in trying to determine whether somebody's going to be a danger to others? And what the primary thing they look for is criminal records. Well, we already have laws dealing with criminal records. If you're a felon, you're banned for life from owning a gun, even if it's a nonviolent felony. Depending upon the state, misdemeanors will get you banned for life from being able to own a gun. But they don't want to do that, because you could say, well, just change it, include more crimes or something like that. But what they want to do is say, because right now you have to be convicted before you lose your rights. They want to have it so you can be arrested but not convicted, or having a charge but not even...
And so how many states have these red flag laws so far?
I should know it, but I think it's 14 states right now have
And
it.
Colorado's the 15th.
Right.
Colorado's the 15th. Sheriff Reams, you made the news recently when Colorado passed their legislation. Can you tell us why you made the news and why you're not in favor of Colorado's red flag laws?
I guess the simplest answer is Colorado passed a version of the red flag bill that I'd call red flag 2.0. It took the model that had been used in those 14 other states, but it added a provision which required law enforcement to go out and conduct a search warrant, not provided them the opportunity, but required law enforcement to go out and conduct a search warrant when that initial red flag order was issued by a judge, which means law enforcement is basically weaponized to go out and not only serve an order, but then also conduct a search warrant simultaneously and confiscate firearms. The person who's having their firearms taken, they don't appear at that initial hearing. It's an ex parte hearing, so they don't get a chance to cross-examine their accusers. There's a whole litany of issues with due process or constitutionality. And basically what I came down to is I said I can either follow this law and violate my oath to uphold the Constitution, or I can go out and enforce this law and violate someone's constitutional rights. I don't feel like that's an option that I can exercise, so I said I just can't do this. I'll be in contempt of court if one of these orders comes down, and whatever punishment happens from that, it happens, which could result in my confinement in my own jail.
That's a pretty bold stand. What, in your opinion, is the main job of a sheriff?
Well, the main job of a sheriff is to protect the peace. That's what I'm required to do, or preserve the peace. That's what I'm required to do statutorily in Colorado. So then you enact a bill that obviously, has some constitutionality issues, but it also doesn't work in protecting the peace. This is a bill that can be easily weaponized by someone who wants to use it for harm against another, and I just don't see where it protects public safety.
So, Dr. Lott, can you tell us whether the data bears out that these red flag laws are efficacious in the states that have had them for longer than Colorado? Have they been effective at anything?
Right, well, you've had, I guess 4 states have had them in effect for at least 5 years. And just as a little bit of background here, people talk about the possible benefits from these laws, but there's also costs. So, do we want to stop somebody who may be going out and harming other people? Sure, that's a good thing to try to do, or harming themselves. But the thing is, you may end up with situations where somebody, because they're afraid that their gun will be taken away from them, they won't be able to go and defend themselves. That may stop them from going and talking to other people about this if they believe that there's a cost. So I know someone whose husband was killed in front of them. Of course they're going to be depressed. They were being stalked by someone who killed their husband. Well, here you have a woman who's just been stalked. She's worried about her safety too at the same time. Do you really want to put her in a situation where she won't talk to other people because she's worried that she won't no longer be able to protect herself if she goes and tries to get help? And then what situation do you put those individuals in if they bottle up their feelings and aren't able to get help from other people? Maybe that makes them more likely that something bad might happen in those situations. So, there are lots of situations. You have officers who, as part of their job, they have to have their gun. Well, police officers get depressed too. Are they going to be afraid now to go and talk to people about their feelings about that because they're worried that somebody, maybe who's trying to be nice to them but may not understand exactly what's going on, takes away their gun and then they lose their job there? So
there's a cost we can't measure because you just don't know how many people.
Well, you may measure it in terms of the fact that rather than reducing suicides, you have some people who may go and commit suicide.
Because they didn't seek the treatment
because they couldn't talk to people.
Right, of the red flag laws being used against them.
And so the question is, what's the net effect on this? And when I've looked at the data, we've looked at data from 1970 up through 2017, you don't find any change in suicides. You don't find any change in mass public shootings or deaths from mass public shootings. You don't find any change in murder, robbery, or aggravated assaults. You do see a slight increase in rape rates that occur. And
in the states that exercise red flag.
Right. When you see what happens before and after they change their laws, and also relative to what's happening in other states. There have been a couple other studies that maybe look at just one particular state, but the problem is you can't really just look at one place that's changing its law in one time because you only have one experiment there.
Right.
You can't really account for other factors that may be changing. And the question really is, maybe suicides are falling nationally over some period of time. You want to know, does the state that adopts these laws, does their suicide rate fall faster or slower than the other states that aren't changing their laws? And when you try to do, the statistics the right way, you just don't see any benefits from these laws.
In a state that's got these laws, how many guns are confiscated or how many people have their Second Amendment rights taken away?
Well, you have a couple states last year, for example, that instituted this. Florida had it in effect for 9 months. They had 1,000 guns were taken away.
The concern there, I think, is the judge is always going to be worried that he was the one who didn't approve of the order.
Right. Well, the only thing that he sees in front of him when he's issuing the original warrant is just the complaint that's there. That's the whole process with due process that was being talked about.
That's what they mean when they say ex parte. Correct. There's only one party there. The person who's being accused is not present, isn't even aware.
They don't even know what's going on.
And, it could be somebody who's well-meaning, or it could be, he mentioned, weaponized. It could be somebody that wants to cause trouble for somebody else too. In Colorado, basically anybody can pick up the phone and call in and say that they have a concern about someone. And so, you you have some real problems that can exist in terms of who can bring the complaints, even if they're well-meaning. They may not know the person.
Back to some of the negative effects or unintended consequences of this. There was a case in Maryland, wasn't there, of a man who was served with one of these?
Right, well, what they do is they try to surprise the person, and to make it so that the person can't have any response or anything there. And they went to this individual's house at 5 a.m. in the morning, I guess 5:17 a.m., knocked on it. He took his gun with him to the door because, who knocks on your door at 5 o'clock in the morning? And the police say he raised his gun and they shot him. And, it could be that they behaved perfectly reasonable. There's no video or anything to
But
show
they were
that.
put into that situation.
Right. So it was dangerous for the police officers.
Can you talk about that, Sheriff Reams, about how this could make your deputies less safe?
Sure.
Or the people they're serving the warrant on? Is it true that you need to get the drop on somebody to resolve an issue,
Right.
like they may be contemplating something?
Well, I guess that's kind of a two-part question,
Yeah.
because if we really believe someone is a significant risk to themselves, if they're such a risk to themselves, the idea of going through a court process first before we go render aid kind of seems like you're delaying the aid to that person anyways. It's just slowing down the process of helping that person. But let's say you do go through this red flag order, this order issued. I would argue oftentimes that the element of surprise never works out in these types of instances too well for law enforcement, because it is a surprise. A person doesn't know what you're there for. Just like Dr. Lott said, knocking on someone's door at 5 a.m., I can tell you in my county, you're oftentimes going to be met at a doorway with a gun, because that's not when you should be knocking on someone's door under normal circumstances. So then that takes you to the element, well, what about a no-knock warrant? We don't do those in Weld County. I don't allow my officers to do those, but that doesn't mean it's not provided for in the law. And there are some agencies that will very well go down that path for that element of surprise. But when it's a surprise, you can't predict how the person on the other end of that surprise is going to react. And when you add firearms into it, obviously there's a potential for disaster.
And let's presume this thing went well, and you go in and you take all of their guns or some of their guns. How do you know? Do you go there with a list? How would you know all of the guns that might be in that house?
Well, there's no way of knowing. As anyone knows, there's not a gun registry out there, nor should there be. We don't have any way of knowing exactly how many firearms a person possesses, but by the Colorado law, I'd be required to go out and take any gun that they possess or could come in possession of. So not just the guns that they lawfully own, but maybe that their roommate owns or that they could have possession of. So a spouse, any line in that.
And then when your deputies are walking out, here was somebody who wasn't agitated.
Now they are.
And you've agitated them, and you have no idea of knowing, did you take all their firearms?
Well, and to that point, I've left them in place. So they're a significant risk to themselves. I've disarmed them, or I think I've disarmed them. I think I've gotten every gun that they may own, but I haven't done anything to treat that person. So agitated, I would say that, you've probably made the situation worse other than better.
That's a great point. Did you have?
Yeah. Look, there are 2 points to make. One is we already have laws on the books to go and deal with people who may have the mental issues that are being talked about here. So the question is to try to, then it should be the burden to try to show that this will be an improvement over, you can have an emergency hold, 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. These new rules kind of take out the mental health experts. You would have a hearing before where you'd have mental health experts. No mental health experts have to be involved in this.
Well, who does get to decide, and who can issue a claim, or who could turn into a judge or the authorities that, hey, this person is in danger, you need to go take their guns? Does it have to be like a spouse?
It depends on the law. In
Colorado,
Colorado, it's anybody basically.
Colorado, it's a family member or a household member, but a household member is described as someone that you've lived with at some point in your life. Whether that be a long-term roommate or just someone you lived with 5 years ago, or a family member, but that same definition applies. So let's say maybe you dated a girl 20 years ago, and you guys cohabitated, well, that person could be eligible to file a red flag bill, but any law enforcement officer can on the word of another person.
You know, it's also not a serious solution to the problem. I mean, just going and taking away somebody's gun, if you really believe somebody's a danger, that, you know, that makes about as much sense as saying, well, we won't let you legally buy opioids or something. I mean, the main suppliers of illegal guns are drug dealers. I mean, they have guns in order to protect their property. So just because you say that we'll take away the guns that you already have, if the person's really a danger, they can go and get weapons other ways. There are other weapons that they can go and use that are around there. If you really believe somebody's a danger, then, you know, the original law, which allows a psychiatric hold and an evaluation to see whether the person's a danger to others, you know, that at least allows you to go and involuntarily commit somebody. But just to say, I'm not going to let you legally buy a weapon, a gun, I don't see how that really solves the problem that you have if you really believe that the person's a danger.
So these are unconstitutional, they don't work. Why are people pushing them? Okay, because I see it happening here in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And Sheriff Reams, I'm glad that you're up here as a voice of common sense. We don't have enough of that in D.C. Trying to explain as a sheriff who's been a deputy, who's been at all levels of law enforcement, and now is in charge of the peace and well-being of the citizens of Weld County, that this isn't going to work.
Right.
Why do these ideas catch on so much? And why do I have even Republican colleagues up here who think these are a good idea?
People want to do something. The question is, I don't think people realize that there are already laws that are there.
Yeah.
You know, they want to make it look like they're doing something also. So it's always this tendency to pass new additional laws. But, you know, I wish there were easy ways to make sure we could identify people who might cause a problem someplace. I think these are just laws that gun control groups push in order to make it costly or risky for people to be able to own guns, to try to scare people into not owning guns. But, you know, to me, if I can't identify whether somebody's going to commit a crime before they do that, my question is, well, what's your backup plan? You know, we often have these laws being passed as a solution for mass public shootings. Florida's, for example, Connecticut, other states have done this after mass public shootings have occurred in those places. You know, to me, I look at these mass public shootings and I keep on seeing them occur time after time after time in places where general citizens are banned from having guns, these gun-free zones. These guys may be crazy in some sense, but they're not stupid. They want to kill as many people as possible because they're doing it to go and get attention. It's their way of committing suicide. But the way to stop them is to go and take away their goal, which is killing lots of people. And the way you do that is by making sure that somebody can quickly be there in order to go and stop the attack. And so we just had another school shooting in Colorado. You know, I wish the school and more schools, there's a few in Colorado that have teachers that carry, but you know, we can look across the country. We have 20 states now to varying degrees have teachers in schools that actually carry guns. We just finished a study on this. If you look at it, you do not find a school shooting where anybody's been injured or killed anywhere near school hours at any state, any school that has teachers carrying. All the attacks that have been occurring have been taking place in areas where teachers can't protect themselves or others.
And all of the bad things, they say, what if we do this, then this will happen.
Well, you
We've
can
got
look.
20 states, right?
Right, no, that's exactly right.
Happen.
We don't need to guess anymore about that. We can go and say, do students go and get a hold of the teacher's guns and do something with them? Well, there's not one case where students gotten a hold of a teacher's gun. Do they, you know, they accidentally shoot students? Do the teachers do that or something?
Do the police show up and shoot the teacher
Right.
because they think they're the perpetrator? Never happened. Just to wrap this up, Sheriff Reams, do you have some final thoughts on
Sure.
advice we should take in D.C. or what's going on in Colorado?
Well, my whole purpose for coming out here was to try to bring attention at a different level than just in the state of Colorado of what a red flag bill is and what a red flag bill can do to a state. And I know there's efforts at the national level to create grant programs for red flag bills, and I absolutely don't want to see Colorado's model become the thing that gets pushed forward. I don't think red flag bills address the true issue. If we want to address the issue, we got to address mental health and mental well-being. A red flag bill is a dangerous proposition for many states, and if Colorado's model is used, you're going in a bad direction. Federal legislators need to know that this isn't a good way to go.
That's well put. Dr. Lott, any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, there are other costs that we haven't talked about in virtually all the states. If you have to pay your own legal bills to go and do this, and so who are you going to be taking guns away from? It's basically going to be poor individuals that are there. Maybe people who live in high crime areas. Why should they be the ones who are penalized as a result of this? I mean, we're talking about thousands of dollars to go and hire a lawyer to go and appear in court with you. Those are real costs for a lot of people.
Well, thanks for joining me here in my office today here in the U.S. House of Representatives. Even if you aren't sold on the Second Amendment issue here, I think this should be a concern for Fourth Amendment advocates and anybody that values the rule of law and the presumption that you are innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely. And
these red flag laws turn that upside down. They put sheriffs in bad positions and their deputies, endanger the people. We've got the data to show they don't work. And so it's just red flag laws are a bad idea all around. So let's make sure they don't happen. Thank you very much, guys.
thanks for